Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name's Anna. I'm a clinical psychology doctoral candidate, and this channel is about real-life applications to psychology. Today's video is actually part of a mini-series on leveling up your self-esteem. So we're going to be talking about some body image tips for two types of people with low self-esteem, avoiders versus compulsors, and I'll tell you how to identify which one you are. But first, if this is your first time here and you enjoy this video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up and or subscribing to this channel if you want to see more. And let's just go into today's video. So let's talk a little bit about the concept of avoiders versus compulsors. When we feel anxiety about something, we tend to do one of two things: to either avoid that thing or to take part in a compulsion, or some people do both. Most of you are probably already familiar with avoidance. You try not to expose yourself to a certain stimulus. And compulsions, if you don't know, are a behavior meant to counteract your anxiety about a certain stimulus. So for example, the typical over-cleaning to get rid of germs. Compulsions are a component of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, but they're not exclusive to OCD. There are actually a bunch of different disorders that do have compulsions within them, specifically anxiety disorders. And also, I think we all have compulsive behavior from time to time. If you think about it, even betting or video games can be compulsive. So compulsions are not exclusive to OCD. They can also be a big part of disorders such as BDD or EDs. I can't say the word because I don't want this to get demonetized. BDD is actually in the same category of disorders as OCD, and I would argue that EDs also operate within the same type of obsessive compulsive anxiety, where you're obsessing over your appearance and your weight, and you're taking part in certain behaviors to make you temporarily feel better. Now that I think about it, I would actually conceptualize EDs as a combination between BDD, because your view of yourself is distorted, and OCD, because you're obsessing over things, avoiding your anxiety triggers, and taking part in compulsions. But we're not here to talk about the ins and outs of specific disorders. This video is for anyone that struggles with body image, and of course, please seek professional help if you are struggling with this to the point where you feel it's a real problem for you. For anyone who struggles with body image, these tend to be the two patterns that we see in responding to body image related insecurities: avoidance and compulsions. And of course, many people do a mix of both. Why is it important to know what your go-to is? Because bad body image can look very different from person to person. A person wearing a very flimsy outfit, camouflaging in makeup, looking in the mirror, weighing themselves a lot, can actually have the same body image issues as a person who wears baggy clothing, stays in, never weighs themselves, is scared of certain stimuli. So let's talk first about behaviors avoiders might take part in and what the treatment is for avoiders. And of course, this is much better done with a therapist than on your own. And then we'll do the same for compulsors. So avoiders, like the name says, avoid things. This could be a situation, a person, a place, a piece of clothing, a piece of food, etc. In terms of situations or places, you might avoid going to the pool because you don't want your makeup to wash off or for your hair to get wet. You might avoid going to the doctor's office because you put on a little weight since they weighed you last time. You might avoid weighing yourself in general. You might avoid going to dance class because there is a strong diet culture there. You might avoid going to the restaurant because you're afraid you won't be able to stop yourself from eating the cheesy bread. You might avoid dating because you don't want someone to see your naked body. You might avoid going shopping because you're afraid of looking in the mirror. You might avoid letting people take photos of you. The list goes on and on. In terms of people, you might avoid a family member that always comments on your body. You might avoid someone you haven't seen in a long time because you worry they'll think you put on weight or you look worse than before or older or whatever it may be. You might avoid someone that looks in a certain way that makes you feel envious, like for example, someone that's skinnier than you. And you might avoid someone who you think will judge you for your looks, which honestly I completely understand. In terms of clothing, you might avoid tank tops because you hate your arms. You might avoid shorts or skirts because you hate your legs. You might wear baggy clothing because you don't want people to see the shape of your body. You might avoid wearing bikinis. You might avoid flat shoes because you're self-conscious about your height and you always want to wear heels. You might avoid a certain color or style that you feel is very unflattering to you. In terms of food, again, the list could be infinite. You might avoid dessert because maybe that's your fear food. You might avoid foods in high fat or sodium or carbs. You might avoid a certain class of foods, like anything with wheat, for example. You might avoid a certain meal of the day, like let's say breakfast, because you've been really rigidly, intermittently fasting. You might avoid a specific food that gives you really bad anxiety, like let's say pizza. Like I said, the list goes on and on about things that you could avoid if that's your go-to way of coping with poor body image. What the treatment consists of for avoiders is avoidance hierarchy, exposure therapy, paired with coping and relaxation skills. An avoidance hierarchy is essentially you're making a list of all the different things that you avoid that give you anxiety, with those that give you the least amount of anxiety at the bottom and those that give you the highest amount of anxiety at the top. Be very, very specific when you're constructing this. This is one place where it is really helpful to have a therapist working with you. Try all the different possible scenarios. For example, if you avoid eating out and you avoid eating dessert, you might write down going for sushi as a 4 out of 10 in terms of anxiety, or going out for sushi and dessert as 6 out of 10, going out for a starter and a meal and dessert at an Italian restaurant as 10 out of 10, and so on. Be very specific, try all of the different combinations and contexts that you could come into contact with in the real world. Or maybe you avoid wearing certain clothes. So a long sleeved shirt at home is maybe a 2 out of 10, a long sleeved shirt outside is 3 out of 10, a short sleeved shirt at home is 4 out of 10, a short sleeved shirt outside is 5 out of 10, a tank top anywhere is 9 out of 10. Like I said, be very, very specific, and you can rate these out of 10 or even out of 100. I would recommend out of 100 because, like I said, the more specific, the better. Now, once you have your avoidance hierarchy, go through it starting at the bottom and don't go on to the next thing in your hierarchy until you feel you've truly mastered the level before. For example, if you went out for sushi and drinks last night and your anxiety was through the roof, do it again this week and then the week after that until you learn to associate that this thing does not cause me harm, the world did not stop in its orbit, everything is fine. You want to be building on your strengths. If you go from 0 to 100, there's a good chance you'll fail. But if you go from 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, your anxiety level will calibrate and you will go on to the next level knowing that you're already mastering this one. This is essentially what you're doing. You're proving to yourself that you have nothing to be scared of and don't need to avoid these things that you've catastrophized in your head. The more you avoid anything, the more you start to believe that it's truly dangerous. But the more you expose yourself to it, the more you remember that, oh, this actually isn't that terrifying. Also, here's another important distinction. In order to work through that anxiety, you have to let yourself feel it to almost its full effect, let's say 75%. And then you follow it up with some relaxation or coping strategies immediately. So let's say that you go out for a walk in shorts and it's extremely distressing for you. Finish your walk, force yourself to go through with it, and afterwards maybe you take a bath, do some breathing exercises, watch your favorite movie, talk to a friend, whatever makes you relax. You're also pairing the exposure exercise with self-regulation so that you're realizing, oh yeah, the anxiety absolutely sucks, but it doesn't last forever. Actually, I can cope with this anxiety. So that's the treatment generally for avoiders. Now, what about compulsors? As I mentioned, a compulsion is something you do to counteract your anxiety. In this case, body image anxiety. This could be any number of things. It could be body checking in a mirror on the windows that you walk past, compulsively weighing yourself, reassurance seeking, like asking someone, do I look fat in this? It can be changing your clothes over and over again because you feel like you don't look good in anything. It could be purging. It could be camouflaging yourself, like refusing to smile because you think it makes one of your imperfections pop, only letting people see you from your good side, and so on. It could be plastic surgery, so like getting lip fillers more and more often because you're self-conscious about your lips. It could be grooming activities like makeup, hair, clothing. It could be using a filter or significantly face tuning your photos. It could be restricting how much food you eat, so like not eating when you're hungry. It could be over-exercising to the point where you punish yourself or are trying to make up for calories that you've eaten. Again, the list goes on and on for things you might do to counteract your body image anxiety. So what's the treatment for compulsors? They're called urge cards. So urge cards are when you try to tolerate your urges, the urges to take part in these compulsions, and you create better coping instead. So on some flashcards or in a journal, write down all the different compulsions that you take part in. And then make a card for each of them in which you relabel the urge. So for example, I am feeling the urge to body check. Reattribute the urge. So for example, this is my brain trying to make sure I'm not as disgusting as I think I am in my head. Refocus. This is something else that you focus your attention on. So for example, mindfulness of the present moment, like if you're out with friends, truly throwing yourself into the conversation, or if you're making a drawing, truly focusing on the details of the drawing, or it could be something else that you choose to focus your attention on, like a grounding activity like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which I discuss in this video somewhere up here. And then revalue. So for example, saying, right now, I could instead focus on my value of being kind to other people because body checking, that's not really in line with any of my values. So every time you feel the urge to do a compulsion, you instead resist the urge and have a plan ready to go. Throughout the week, tally every time that you manage to resist the compulsion versus the number of times that you gave into it. The more you use your urge cards and practice better coping, hopefully the more you will be able to resist these compulsions rather than to submit to them. Just like with the avoiders, make sure to follow up resisting these urges with a relaxation strategy because you want to realize that the anxiety will not last forever and you are capable of pushing through it while feeling better afterwards. It will get easier with practice, I promise. A few final words. What I'm describing here is basically the treatment for OCD. It's called exposure and response prevention therapy, where you expose yourself to things that you avoid and then you resist those compulsions that come up with them. And I think this is because, like I said, I truly think body image difficulties have a very obsessive compulsive nature to them. I know this is one of the hardest things to go through because you literally have nowhere to run. You cannot escape your own body. You are encapsulated within it. You have to live with it whether you like it or not, unless you of course manage to trigger an out-of-body experience. So I know it's incredibly hard, but I hope this video gave you some direction for how to get through it. And again, I do highly recommend, if you're struggling with this, working alongside a therapist if you can. Hope this video was useful. If it was, and you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to join for more real-life applications to psychology, and I hope you have a great week.